Hi, I'm Diane Mason, and I'm the Boone County Cooperative Extension Service Family and Consumer Science Agent. I'm here with David Kester, our horticulture agent in our environmental centered garden, and today we're going to talk about these. And David, I picked this up at the grocery store this morning, and you're going to have to tell me all about it.
Well, I'll tell you, your Brussels sprouts that you picked this morning did a little bit better than mine did. I think these came from maybe Wisconsin or something like that, and they are that's really what we're after. And you know, we've got some Brussels sprouts here that, and I'll let you hold that one. These are our plants, and we didn't get them started as early as we should have. But underneath this foliage, we've got some little sprouts coming, and you can kind of pull off the leaves like that and expose them a little bit. But we should have started our sprouts much earlier this summer, and then they would have been bigger, and hopefully, I don't know if they would have gotten that big, but they would have gotten to be a little bit more sizable. But this plant is so winter hardy. I mean, it can take temperatures down to 20 degrees and still be okay. And you can see we've got a lot of frost out here, and that really won't hurt this plant. Matter of fact, they say that it actually improves the flavor of the sprouts. And, you know, it's one of those vegetables that you either love or you hate. But as we've talked about, it really depends, I think, on the freshness and how they're prepared. And that makes a difference. And I think a lot of people who don't like them just haven't had them the right way.
I agree with that. I see ice on the leaves of these.
We do. And that will, as the day warms up, it'll thaw, and these plants will be fine. And the sprouts on there will be fine. They'll be really fresh. Matter of fact, they say that with a little bit of cold weather, the flavor improves with them.
And you've told me that you may be able to harvest these in March or April?
We can. Sometimes they will actually go through the winter, and they'll start to grow up in February, March a little bit, and we can still kind of control and harvest them.
Now these are part of the cole crop?
Cole crops, yes. Brussels sprouts are a relative of cabbage. They're just tiny little cabbages on there. And they're just, they were named after Belgium. That's where they originated. And Brussels, of course, the city in Belgium. And Thomas Jefferson is actually credited with bringing them to this country.
You know, he brought a lot of things to
America.
He did.
He really did.
Very much into horticulture.
He was quite a gardener.
So, fantastic. Can I eat the leaves if
I can? You can. Usually you want to get the uppermost leaves, but definitely they, just like cabbage, collards, those kind of things, they can all be eaten.
Okay, fantastic. Any tips for growing or any things I need to watch for?
Really, these, you know, again, we should have, this is a plant that we start in maybe midsummer. We start the seeds up, and then we get them in the ground the 1st of August, and they have 80 to 100 days they need to grow to mature. And so that's where we kind of made a mistake this year. We didn't get them started early enough, and they are trying to breed some that are a little bit of shorter season ones so that we can get them in, but it's really not a good spring crop for us here in Kentucky because it gets hot so fast and they like cool weather.
Okay. Now as I harvest, if I look at these, I see little ones down here.
Right.
If I pick those on the bottom, can I pick them as they go? Or
yes.
do I need to wait till they get like this?
You start at no, you don't. You can start from the bottom, pick those, and they will continue to ripen as you go up the stem. Right. And that's usually what you do. And they say, I haven't counted those, but usually you get about 50 sprouts per plant. Now, ours aren't going to do that, I'm afraid.
I think you're lagging a little bit. Yeah, sorry about that.
I think so too.
Better luck next year,
right?
All right, fantastic. Any bugs? Anything I need to think
They're
about?
the same kind of bugs that you get with cabbage and kale and all those other ones. This time of year, you're not going to have bugs. So this is one of their advantages now. We don't have to do any insect treatments. One of the things that these fall crops, the broccoli, the cabbage, the Brussels sprouts, the kale, and the collards, have in common is insect problems. And they will have these insect problems in the spring of the year, and they will definitely have them in the fall of the year. And since I'm going to be eating the part that is infected with the insect problems, I want to make sure I'm using something safe. And we have two really good products that are safe. And one of them is Safer Soap. And Safer Soap will take care of the aphids on these crops. And the other one is Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. It's also called Thuricide. It's a biological product. You put it on before you see the insect problem happening, and as the insects eat this, it freezes up their gut and they die. Very safe product. Humans can eat it and no problem whatsoever. Another way that we have gotten into controlling insects is with a row cover. And generally you'd want to put this on when your plants are pretty young. You can also put them on when you start to see some insects, but you can put this over the top of your crop. You might want to find a day that's not too windy, and you want to, of course, put the staples in on the side of it. But what you've done here is that you've excluded the insects from being able to get to your plants. Very safe way. Sunlight will get through, rain will get through it, and a really good way to have a very clean crop, pesticide free.
David, I just thought of another question. What about rain and too much rainwater or too little rainwater? Does that affect these things?
Well, you know, we had that kind of fall this year. August was very dry. September was one of the driest on record. And we have irrigation out here, and we had to supplement on a weekly basis. We put irrigation on these, and we put about 1 inch a week on during that time. And quite honestly, without it this year, we would have had very poor results. So yes, we did have to irrigate.
So what about wet feet though?
Wet feet, that's the other problem. Generally, we've got these up on raised beds in the fall, and so the drainage is good, and we haven't had a problem with that.
Brings me to another question. Can I grow these in containers?
Yes, you can, and that's something that I'm glad you mentioned. All of these can grow in a container. Now, obviously, your cabbage, you're going to get one cabbage per container, but there are smaller varieties of broccoli that are suited for containers. Kale, you could put 3 or 4 plants in a container. Cauliflower, there's smaller varieties of cauliflower that are suitable for containers.
Sometimes if people don't have that many people in their house,
right,
you know, one or 2 heads of cabbage or
exactly.
kale might do it.
Sure, and very easy to do. And you know, it's just you know, I'm from the north, as we said, and I suffer from the heat here in Kentucky in the middle of the year. And I love fall gardening and I love spring gardening. But, you know, sometimes getting out here on a 95-degree day, there's other things I'd rather do.
Kind of wipes you out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't take too long to get hot and sweaty then. Mm-hmm. So, great. Water, no water?
They like an even supply of water and fertility, the same as the other crops that we've talked about. They like that, and just a good long growing season is what they need.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that information.
Sure.
We're going to go in the kitchen and see if we can share some information on how to cook these so you might like them. And I thought we'd touch just a little bit on Brussels sprout varieties or products we can get at the supermarket before we leave the garden. So this was the fresh Brussels sprouts that I bought in the produce section. These aren't typically in the produce section, but I think because it's fall and winter, this was available. So always kind of fun to see that and see how they grow. You can buy these also in the produce section, just in a bag or in a plastic bag. When you're purchasing these, make sure that you get them that aren't brown, overly browned or yellowed leaves on the bottom or on the item. This is a pre-cut, already cut in half for you, already cleaned and cut in half, so you could open this bag and go ahead and cook these. You wouldn't have to do anything with it. Of course, you're going to pay for that convenience. And then over in the frozen section, they have a variety of Brussels sprouts, just plain Brussels sprouts, the traditional. This is what I grew up on. We grew up on frozen Brussels sprouts, and I really didn't like them as a kid, but after having fresh Brussels sprouts, definitely a better product in my mind. This was also in the frozen section, and it's called baby Brussels sprouts with butter sauce. Just kind of be aware that they've added the butter and you've kind of lost control of it. It's certainly a convenient item to purchase. And then this was also available, and this was Brussels sprouts that were already seasoned, and it has salt and pepper already on it. So you could take this and steam it in the bag and have your Brussels sprouts ready to go. Once again, you're paying for something that is convenient and you don't control the nutrients of it, but that's okay. If this works in your world, that's great. So different types of Brussels sprouts. We're gonna make a recipe here in a little bit that uses different Brussels sprouts and talk a little bit more about the nutrition. So go get some Brussels sprouts and enjoy. Hi, you're just in time for Brussels sprout casserole. It's made with frozen Brussels sprouts, Parmesan cheese, a cream sauce, and has some bacon sprinkled on it. So this is really a yummy dish to try, and the recipe is in your Jewels for Health pamphlet that you got about Brussels sprouts. And today, in addition to this, we're going to talk about Brussels sprouts. Okay, let's talk about some Brussels sprouts. And as we saw earlier, there are a variety of Brussels sprouts you can buy. You can buy them in the frozen food section, in the fresh produce section, and we're going to talk about how to use these. I also found this just recently, and this is one that already has a seasoning packet with it that you can either roast in this bag or put in the microwave in this bag. So that's kind of fun, something different to look for. I also picked up these Brussels sprouts, and this would be a sample of some Brussels sprouts that maybe you wouldn't want to purchase. They have really dark ends, they've got some really yellow leaves, a lot of mold and discoloration on them. So I would have normally left these at the store. But I wanted to show you those so that you would know. You might be able to peel off some of the outer leaves to get down to some good Brussels sprout, but you're going to have a lot of waste. So if you have a choice, I would leave these at the grocery store. Let's talk about roasted Brussels sprouts. Normally you would just clean these Brussels sprouts, cut them in half, and then we'll put them on a baking sheet. So to clean my Brussels sprout, I'm just going to cut the very, very end off. I don't want to cut too far up on the Brussels sprout or all of the leaves will fall apart. I'll peel off any tough outer leaves or discolored leaves or any that might be showing signs of damage, and just cut them in half. I'll put them in my bowl so I'm ready to go. It's about a pound of Brussels sprouts, which will feed 4 to 5 people probably once they're roasted, and normally just cut top to bottom. I'm going to show you how to shred these here in just a minute. Take my Brussels sprouts, put them in a nice bowl. Sometimes people will put them in a plastic bag and shake them to coat them with the oil. Kind of like using a bowl, because then I get all of the oil out of it. If I put it in a bag and shake it, I tend to leave a lot of the spices and oil inside the bag, and I have a hard time getting it out. It takes about a tablespoon of oil per pound of Brussels sprout. So you can kind of judge that on your own. You don't want to get too much on, but you don't want to get too little on either. I'm just going to sprinkle these with salt and pepper and kind of be generous, because like a lot of flavoring with your Brussels sprouts. Some pepper and some salt. And again, I'm going to give these a good stir. And add a little bit more pepper, I think. You can also put other seasonings on. You can certainly use thyme. There are other basil, oregano, any type of seasoning that you like. If you have a seasoning salt blend or a salt-free blend that you like, you could always put that on and roast your Brussels sprouts. Spread them out in a single layer. You don't want them to touch. You don't want them piled on top of one another, because if that happens, then they won't roast. They'll steam. They'll get mushy instead of getting that good char and that good roast. So we're just going to put these in the oven. I have the oven set for 450 degrees. Probably take about 20 minutes in the oven. While those are roasting, let's talk about shredding Brussels sprouts, because you can eat Brussels sprouts raw, and shredded Brussels sprout salad is a great thing to have. So again, we're just going to cut the end off to take off that darker end, take off any of the outer leaves. Again, these have been washed. I can shred them on a box cutter. Usually use the slicing side, or you have to be really careful to not get your finger. So I have nice shreds there. I could use a food processor if you have one. Just use the slicing blade and make the slice as thick as you want if you have that option. Or I think the easiest way to do it is with a knife, because I can then clean up pretty quickly. So I'm going to cut my Brussels sprout in half, take off the ends, cut the Brussels sprout from top to bottom, and then I'll just cut tiny little slivers to make my shredded sprouts. And again, I just find this easier. I have less equipment to clean up, and oftentimes, unless I have just a lot to do, I can get them done in a very quick amount of time. So just a few reminders about Brussels sprouts. Don't buy ones that have yellow leaves on them that are looking spoiled already. If you see a lot of holes in the leaves, it usually means that they had aphids or some type of infection as they were growing. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means if there's one or two in the bag or one or two in the pile, it's not a bad thing. But if the whole container of Brussels sprouts is infected, it's probably best to go ahead and leave those behind. Puffy Brussels sprouts just means they're kind of old. So again, avoid those. You can always put your excess leaves in the compost pile. They're a good source of vitamin C, they're a good source of fiber, good source of potassium. They're not a great source of those things, but they're a good source of those things. And remember that Brussels sprouts are in season from fall through early spring. So you can usually find them year-round in America. It just doesn't mean that they were grown in America or that they would be available at a farmer's market. Here in Kentucky, Brussels sprouts do best in cooler weather, so early spring or fall into winter. But grab some Brussels sprouts and enjoy those. So after we get these roasted when done, I will show you a few tricks for putting some items on those to make them even better. Okay, our Brussels sprouts are almost done. And what I'm going to do with these Brussels sprouts, I'm going to put some Parmesan cheese and bacon on them just to give them that extra yum. You can also put maple syrup or honey or sriracha sauce. This is balsamic vinegar, and then there's honey mustard here too. So all of these would be a good option. Some of these you'd want to put on earlier than I'm putting on the Parmesan and bacon, but I just need the Parmesan to melt and the bacon to get crispy again. That's my goal. So I'm just going to move these a little bit closer together so that my Parmesan doesn't just end up on the bottom of the pan. And I will say I covered this pan with aluminum foil simply to make it easier to clean up. You can do it straight on the pan if you want to. So get some good Parmesan on there. This is pre-cooked bacon. Just going to sprinkle some of that on too. And I'll put it back in the oven just until the bacon, just until the cheese melts and my bacon crisps up again. And we'll pull it back out and take a look at it. Our Brussels sprouts with Parmesan cheese are out of the oven, and I'm just going to put them on this platter just to make it a nice serving container, and people can just eat them. It makes a great side dish, make a great appetizer if you wanted to do that for a sporting event. Just a really good, tasty dish. So again, Brussels sprouts are very versatile. You can roast frozen Brussels sprouts if you find those at the store, if you happen to keep those in your freezer. They'll just take a little bit longer. It's probably a good thing to go ahead and thaw those out and drain them off. That way you're not fighting to try to get rid of all of that extra moisture in your oven. Fresh Brussels sprouts do really well. Roasted, you can boil, you can saute, you can eat them raw, again, the fresh Brussels sprouts. The big thing with Brussels sprouts is not overcooking, because that's probably what most of us remember if we were older and ate Brussels sprouts as a kid. Our parents would boil them to death, and then they taste like sulfur and they're very mushy. So Brussels sprouts have come a long way, or we've come a long way with our knowledge of Brussels sprouts and how to prepare them so that they do really well. So I encourage you to try Brussels sprouts. Thank you for joining us for our Jewels of Health series, and look forward to the upcoming programs.